Hey guys, and welcome back to another Unreal Engine 4 tutorial. In today's video I'm going to be going over how to set up crouching. So we're simply just going to set up crouching with animations from going stand to crouch, crouch idle, crouch moving, and crouch to standing as well, and this will also allow you to maneuver underneath objects like this. So let me hit play and show you what we're going to make today. So if I were to hold down Control or C, as that is my crouch button for me, you can see we're going to have an animation of it going down and up, and this is how we're going to be crouching, and we have idle and moving like this. You can see again we can go underneath this object, which we can't when standing, but we can when crouching. And this is very easy to customize as well, so you can change the animations, change the speed, the height, all this good stuff which you want. But this is what we're going to be making in today's video. So without further ado, let me delete this code and I'll show you how I've done it. So the first thing we want to do is we obviously want to import our animations which we're going to use. Now these are just four which I've got off of mixmode.com and retargeted to the UE4 mannequin, and I've also just edited them a little bit just so they're not leaning as far forward or they're not hovering above the ground, and I'll leave a download link to these specific animations which I've altered in the description down below. So once you've imported those, what we want to do is create an animation blend space for them, and that's so we can nice and easily and smoothly go between idle and moving. So we're going to right click, go to animation, and create a blend space 1D. And we're going to do this to the skeleton which we are using for our character, which for me is the UE4 mannequin skeleton. Again, set this up for whichever one you are using. I'm just going to name this one Crouch BS for blend space, opening that up straight away. In here, all we're going to do is change the horizontal axis name to speed, and the minimum value is 0, maximum is 300. Now the reason it's 300 is because the default maximum speed the player can travel at when crouching is a speed of 300. If you want to change that, you can do, and I'll show you in a minute how to, but just set that up to whatever you want. But again, by default, it's going to be 300, and that is what I'm keeping as. Then we just want to import our animations into here. So I'm going to go to the asset browser, and what I'm going to do is simply get crouching idle, put that all on the left of 0 speed, and then crouch walking, I'm going to put it on the third bar in, so not all the way to the right, but far enough over, with a speed of 225 for me. So you can see if you hold down left shift and move your mouse, you move this green dot, which is just the preview. So when we're not moving, we're going to be idle. And when we are moving, we're going to be walking like so. And that's just the nice simple way of setting up our blend space. What we also want to do is scroll down on the left to target weight interpolation time. And I'm going to change this to be 10. And that just makes the transition between the idle and moving to be a nice and smooth and doesn't snap between them. So it just looks a lot better. You can change that value to be whatever you want, but 10 seems to work well for me. So I'm going to save and close that, as that is all we need to do in there. And next up, we're going to open up our player blueprint. So for me, that's content, third person BP, blueprints, third person character. And in here, we're going to actually set up the buttons for crouching. So what we're going to do first is go to edit and project settings, go to input, and we're going to create a new action mapping, naming this crouch. Then we're going to set the keys on this to be the C key and also the control key, so left control there. Because people use both of those or one or the other, but both of those are very common for crouching in games, so I'm just going to put both of them on there so the player can use either one if they want to. I'm going to close that, then we're going to right click on our event graph and search the action mapping we just made. So I named it crouch like so, so you see action events crouch. And we're going to get that like that, so whenever we press C or left control, this action mapping is going to fire off. And what I also want to do is I want to make sure that you have to hold down the button to crouch, so it's not a toggle, it's a hold. If you want to do toggle, come out of pressed and get a flip-flop like so. With A, it's going to get just a crouch function, which is already made by Unreal Engine, and B is going to be the uncrouch, which is also already made. And that there is toggling, so when you press control for the first time, it's going to crouch. When you press it again for the second time, it's going to uncrouch. However, if you just want it to be hold, then pressed will go into crouch and released will go into uncrouch, like so. And that's a simple way of now crouching and uncrouching. I will go over what these functions do since they are already made. When we crouch, what it does is it just simply reduces the size of the capsule component, and then that also lowers the camera down to be at a better height, and it also reduces the player's speed, and all of that together will also set a boolean to be true of is crouching in the character movement. One final thing we need to do in here is select the character movement and search for crouch. So you can see this is all the different options which we can customize. So you can change the half height of the capsule component, change the speed, change it to can walk off ledges. So maybe like in Minecraft, when you're crouching, you can't fall off a ledge. You can do that here as well if you wanted. You just tick that. So I'm going to do that as well just to show you. And then what we also want to do is make sure we tick can crouch. If you don't do that, these functions aren't going to work. So we need to make sure we do tick can crouch like so. Close that, compile, save, and that is all we need to do in the character blueprint. Very, very simple, because again, half of it is already set up for us. We're just telling the engine when we do want to crouch and when we do want to stop crouching. So let's close that and now finish setting up the animations. So we need to open up our animation blueprint, which for me is going to be content, mannequin, animations, third person and BP. But again, just do this wherever it is for you. And we want to go straight to the event graph like I have here. And you should have something similar to this. If you don't have one set up already, I do have a video on going over how to set one up, but I imagine you probably do have it already. So what we're going to do is we want to get the character movement from our player. So if you're using this method, you've got try get pawn owner, get movement component, and out of that, what we're going to do, so out of the character movement, is get is crouching, or just is crouching, sorry. And that again is the Boolean value I was talking about earlier, which is going to be set to true when we're crouching and false when we're not crouching. In the same way we have falling there, it just does it automatically for us based upon the character movement. We're going to right click on the return value of that and promote it to a variable, naming this is crouching, question mark, just so we now have a reference inside of the animation blueprint whether or not the player is or isn't crouching. So again, that way we can change the animations based upon that value. Making sure to connect all the executions in like I just did there as well. Compile, save, and now we're going to go over to the anim graph, which we have already set up here as well, into the state machine, and again you should have something set up similar to this. Again, if you don't already, I do have different videos going over how to set up an animation blueprint. So I only want to be able to crouch while we're either idle or moving, not while we're jumping, so I'm just going to come off of this state here. I'm going to drag an arrow out of that state and add a new state, naming this stand to crouch, or STC, or whatever you want to call it. Then I'm going to double click this to open it up, with the animation in here being standing to crouched. Nice and simple, like so. Go back to default, drag out of this state, and add another state, naming this crouch, or crouched, or whatever you want to call it. Double click to open that up, with this one being the crouch blend space we created earlier. And the speed value is obviously going to be the horizontal axis which we set up, and that can be the speed value which we already have in here. Again, if you've already set this up, you should have that, and I do it in that video as well. Go back to default, drag another line out of crouch to again get another state, with this one being crouch to stand. And these two here are just the transitional animations from going standing to crouch and crouch to standing, as you can tell by the name, just so it looks a little nicer and a bit more fluid. And then we're going to connect that state all the way back into the idle run state there. So I hope that makes sense for you. So again, we can go from idle to run to stand to crouch, which will then go into crouching, and from crouching we can go to crouch to stand, which will then go back into our idle run. So now we need to set up the transitional lines going from these so we know when to enter these states. So we're going to double click the line going from idle run to stand to crouch first. This is simply just going to be get is crouching connected into there. So if is crouching is true, then we can enter the state. So if we can enter the state, it will go in and play that animation. Then from that state to crouch, what we want to do is go into the crouch state once we finish playing the animation for standing to crouched. So we're going to right click and get time remaining ratio standing to crouched like that. Out of the return value, we're going to get a float is greater than a float, putting in the value of this being 0.2, connecting that up there. Now this value may be different for you depending on which animations you are using, but it will be a small value like that. Again, if you're using my animations, it should be the same. If not, just keep changing the value and testing out to see when it looks perfect for you, so it is cutting off at the right time. Again, basically, when there's 0.2 seconds left of this animation, so when we finish it, it's then going to exit this state and enter the crouch state, which is obviously going to be our blend space. Then from the crouch state to the crouch to stand state, that is simply going to be if we're not crouching anymore, so when we stop. So we're going to get is crouching, then get a not boolean, connecting that into the return value result there. So when we stop crouching, this is obviously going to go to false, which means we can then enter this transition going into crouch to stand animation. Then the same way we did stand to crouch, we just want to play it so when this animation finishes. So I'm going to double click this line, right click, time remaining in the exact same way, I may not have put the animation in there, so let's double click. We didn't, so that's something we need to do. So double click crouch to stand and make sure we do put the animation in there for crouched to standing like so. Then go back in here, right click, time remaining, ratio crouch to standing, with again it being 0.2 for me, of a float is greater than a float. So sorry if I'm going through this bit slightly quickly, it's just very repetitive. Once you've done the first one, you really know what it is you're doing on all of them. So again, my apologies if I am going slightly quickly, it's just quite a repetitive process in which you should understand what you're doing now. But that is all we need to do. This should be it perfectly set up for us. So again, quite a lot of repetitive words here. When we're going from idle to run to stand to crouch, it's if we are crouching, then it's going to play an animation. Once that animation has finished, it's going to go into our crouch blend space, which obviously includes our idle and walking crouch animations. Then when we let go of crouch, so we finish crouching, we're then going to go to crouch to stand, which will play that animation. And once that has finished, we can go back to our normal idle run blend space, which is again our normal idle and running animations. So we're going to compile, save, and close this. Now if we hit play, this should be it working perfectly. So if I were to hold control, you can see we have the animation for going up and down like so. And if we move about, we have these animations working perfectly like so as well. So if I were to jump, hold crouch, you can see that we don't crouch until we then land back on the floor. And the capsule component for the collision has also updated, so we can travel underneath objects like this, which again we can't when we're walking, but can when we're crouching. So I think that will be it for this video, as we've done everything we wanted to do. Again, I just went over and explained it there, but we've updated it, so we can now move underneath objects that are lower like this, and have the animations working perfectly like so. So thanks so much for watching, I hope you enjoyed it and I hope you found it helpful, and if you did, make sure to like and subscribe down below. So thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.